Hey, what up writers? I'm Violet, welcome back to my channel. Okay, so I'm ready to resurrect the long-suffering craft book review content here on my channel. If you've been watching these in order, you would know that I had a little bit of a writing craft book slump due to a book that I found problematic and ended up DNFing. But I've acquired a bunch of new craft books that I want to get into reading, and I thought as a nice little palette cleanser, sort of bridge between the two, I would talk about this book that I recently read and I mentioned in one of my vlogs, which is Zen and the Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury. But before I get into the book, it's going to be a really short review here today. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about reading physically versus audiobooks. If you know me, you know I do most of my reading through audiobooks. And that's something that really works for me. I'm more of an audio learner in general. But when it comes to writing craft books, I've always bought the physical copies. I like to highlight passages. I like to mark pages. I like to have my craft books next to me while I write. But I really wanted to try to utilize reading through audio books as well, because that's how I do a lot of my fiction reading. And I've also read some nonfiction through audiobooks as well. I'm already getting rambly. Maybe it's not gonna be that short of a video. Anyways, so the point is I've read a few other craft books through audio and they just didn't hit for me. You know, the information it wasn't working in that format for me personally. So I didn't feel like I had enough to say to do reviews for those books. And so I just sort of let them die. I just let them die. They were what they were. I also didn't feel like enough that I wanted to buy the physical copy, or I just didn't feel like I had anything to add to the conversation with those books. But when it comes to Zen and the Art of Writing, this craft book, I think some people wouldn't even consider it a craft book. I do. I consider anything talking about the subject of writing as a writing craft book. But what it is it's a collection of essays that Ray Bradbury did discussing writing and his writing journey and his writing process. So it's not going to be like how-to really advice or exercises or anything like that. It's really just talking about his personal relationship with writing. And he's not even really giving that much advice. He's just saying what he did. And I think that format worked so well as an audiobook. Just to have it and listen to it, you know, while I'm doing other things during the day, it wasn't something that I felt I needed to take notes on or anything like that. It just worked. And I know several other books, or I'm aware of several other books that are sort of done in this format, more of a writer telling their journey and talking about their own processes, but not having it be anything about really plotting or getting into any sort of rules or regulations like that. How some other books can be very advice heavy, where I feel like in Ray Bradbury's book, he was just really talking about his personal journey. And it worked for me. And I found this book at the exact right moment in my life, where I had already sort of come up with this idea that I wanted to be writing daily poems and flash fictions and putting more emphasis on to journaling, which I talked about in a different video of mine. You can check that out. And then I found this book, and I kind of became aware of this book through Kate Kavanagh and Cache Warren, who both talked about doing the Ray Bradbury challenge. And I thought that was going to be a part of this book, but it really wasn't. He never put it out there as like a challenge, hey, write one short story a week for an entire year. He just talked about that's what he did in his process of, you know, certain days were for drafting and then editing and his sort of process with it. But it was never like, you should do this. It was always like, hey, this is what I did for myself, you know, thinking, hey, there's this many weeks in the year. One of these stories is meant to be good. So I think other people sort of took Ray Bradbury's process and made it into a challenge like that. I'm actually not sure where that originated. But he also talked a lot about poetry in this book, and that really hit with me because I had already, like I said, been thinking about getting back into poetry myself and using that as a tool to get into writing. And right in the beginning, he talked about sort of writing with gusto and being in love with writing. And like I said, this found me at the perfect moment where I had kind of fallen out of love with writing. It became more of like a race to finish the next draft and more about productivity and, you know, challenging the beast of a novel, and not about that I loved what I was writing or I loved my process or I loved the words. It was the opposite. So this book found me at the right moment. And like I said, I think this sort of format of craft book works so well for audio. So I could listen to it again and again if I wanted to, you know, just kind of getting that reminder to write with gusto, to love what you're writing, and to have that sort of writing lifestyle. And I think there is a place for books like this. You know, how many books about like plotting and character arcs can you really read? You know, at the end of the day, where it does ends up not getting, you know, just repetitive at some point. Oh gosh, I'm rambling, but you know what I mean. You can see what I'm trying to say here. And the other thing that Ray really talked about in his book was sort of like where he got his idea and how he molded his ideas, and how some ideas ended up expanding into something else. And I think that's a very interesting part of the writing process that we don't get to hear that much about in this type of detail, especially like from somebody of like Ray Bradbury's generation, where some things were a little bit, you know, out of date to these days, but it's so evergreen, you know, the love of words and stories, and how he took his real life inspiration and molded them into fiction. And for me, it was like, when you talk about like showing versus telling and sort of write what you know, he was sort of showing the concept of write what you know and not telling it. And it's like, hey, write what you know, but like how to take these real life inspirations and spin them into fictional things. And I don't know, it hit with me. Some of the essays and parts were a little bit more boring for me personally, but overall I really enjoyed it. I like how they were sort of split up and it really flowed together. Like when you're listening to an audiobook, you can't always, you know, see the parts as well. They kind of just flow together. But for me, this format really worked, and I will use audiobooks, I think, in the future, coming to writing craft books, for ones that are like this, a writer telling their personal experience. Or I think audiobooks would also work really well for rereading craft books that I've already read, you know, to put on, you know, one that I know and love, and just have it and listen to it in the background to sort of keep those things sharp and in my head. I think there's where audiobooks can shine, but as a first read through, I don't think I'm gonna be using audiobooks anymore for craft books. But that's just my quick little review of, you know, doing audiobooks for writing craft books and Zen and the Art of Writing. So if you've read Zen and the Art of Writing, I'd love to know your thoughts on it. And what is your best format for writing craft books? Is it audiobooks, ebooks, or physical books? Let me know down below in the comments, and you can look forward to the craft book writing series being resurrected on my channel, because like I said, I have a big pile to get through and I'm so excited to jump into them this year. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!